Rebirth. The position of hydrogens in an octave can be expanded upon. There is, for example, hydrogen 48, which is created out of the food that we eat by successive transformations within our bodies. This is the hydrogen that we use for ordinary thinking, our state of lucid dreaming, and which works the relatively mechanical part of our intellectual center or mind as we commonly refer to it. With this hydrogen we can only think in terms of yes or no, therefore we see everything divided into irreconcilable opposites. When we think with hydrogen 24, however, we have a different picture of things, for by means of this psychic energy we see everything in a much finer way, through much more subtle interconnections, so that stark opposites disappear and everything appears blended together in some marvelous harmony or rhythm. Hydrogens 48 and 24 are connected with the notes So and La. Then So 48 arises out of the transformation of Do 768, into Re 384, into Mi 192, into Fa 96, into So 48 and then into La 24, finally becoming C12. Suppose therefore that the impressions octave is set to work by means of an individual living as consciously as they possibly can for a short period of time. Here there is Do 48 and here again is a hydrogen with the value of 48, but on the note Do. This hydrogen by transformation within an awakened mind passes to Re 24. There are now two 48s and two 24s. Namely Do 48 and So 48, then La 24 and Re 24. What difference can there be in these two cases? Consider the matter and suppose that you have 100 golden coins and you divide them into two lots. Then decide to pay half of these golden coins into your bank account and use the other half in payment of your debts. Now the golden coins are just the same with regard to their matter, but they have quite different destinations and therefore potentialities. That gold which you pay into the bank can accumulate through interest or investment, whereas that gold which you pay out to clear your debts has gone as far as it can, and I am sure your thoughts about the two sums will be quite different. It's an example of what could be referred to as the difference between red money and black money. We could all agree that 50 coins paid into a bank have a fresher feel about them than those paid out to creditors. In somewhat the same way, emotions that we feel through Re 24 are far fresher than those of La 24. We know how anything that is capable of many transformations has a certain quality of newness and vitality about it, like small spring buds, whereas a thing that is nearly over, that has nearly completed its course, is quite different. Re 24 is in an earlier position in the octave than La 24. A full octave lies between the first Do and the second Do. Where the new Do actually starts a new octave, and thereafter we develop from a cell which passes through its cycle, eventually onto the state C. We are then born or materially incarnate as infants, to begin a new Do. The octave that we left, which began with the fertilized cell as Do, we know nothing about now. We became old and then became young again. We can understand from this illustration that Mi 12 is younger than C12, and that Re 24 is younger than La 24. In general we understand that any one matter of our choosing can also be under many different potentialities and destinations, according to its relation with the things that surround it. In a country of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. Look around at your outer subjective world, then see how things are of quite different materiality, and how their destinations are different, how we could possibly classify things by their uses. How nothing is independent, but everything is connected together, how one thing depends upon another, and how its significance changes in accordance with circumstances. How a thing at one moment may be the most important thing to us in the world, then at the next moment becomes quite unimportant. In seeing out a life like this, we are looking at different substances that are constantly being controlled by forces acting upon them. We are really studying substances, the law of 3 and the law of 7. We all understand better and worse in the outer world, finer and coarser, more rare and more common. We all know what things of high quality and things of common surplus are. We all know what refining means, what separating means. We can distinguish between great literature and the common media of newspapers or magazines. It should therefore not be too difficult to understand what the hydrogens are that work our psychic apparatus, that work our mind and cells, that work our centers, either in a poor manner or in a better way. Using hydrogen 48 first of all, we can reflect upon the illustrations of hydrogens with our formatory center, then expand and elucidate them ourselves. Once this has been laid out, and we begin to think about its meaning, begin to reflect upon some of these commentaries, we have moments of seeing more deeply their significance, which means we have begun to use hydrogen 24 in our understanding. Sometimes this happens as if there were a sudden flash, an epiphany or eureka moment. The mathematician Hamilton, who had thought for years about how to multiply two-dimensional quantities, suddenly while walking along a country road saw the solution, which he said came to him as though a circuit had been miraculously completed in his mind, and a blaze of light resulted. He was so amazed that he took out his pocket knife and carved the formulae which he had just seen, onto the stones of a bridge nearby. This is seeing a problem through a higher hydrogen in our intellectual center. This is definite proof amongst hundreds of others, that the mind can work on different levels. If we see this, then we are beginning to see what different hydrogens mean. If we have never felt anything of this sort, with regard to our own states, the quality of our own feelings or the understanding of our minds, then it is because we do not give ourselves, even in the slightest degree, that first conscious shock that makes it possible for a person to touch new influences. The question can then be asked, why the highest hydrogen appears in the lowest part of the three-story factory in the illustration previously. It must be understood that these different stories do not mean for us, such as we are, either lower or higher. We are, most of us, using only hydrogen 48, in the upper story, whereas our moving and instinctive centers work with hydrogen 24. This simply means that the work going on in the first story is infinitely more intelligent than the work going on in the third story. That hydrogen 12 is at the note C, meaning that it can only do one thing. Which is why our sex center is located in the solar plexus, just below both the movement and the instinctive centers, forming the mechanical triad of one-dimensional being, the very basic building block of life. What is hydrogen 12 then at this point in the octave? It is the hydrogen connected with the possibility of a destiny, that is capable of uniting with its corresponding opposite and so starting a new octave. This very high living hydrogen contains the possibility of producing a new do, that is, of starting something quite new, a new octave. The shock between C and do is looked after very carefully by the cosmic influences that wish to keep life on Earth constantly multiplying. It may be asked therefore what Me12 means, and what offspring it can produce. Remember that Me12 is not made mechanically, naturally or ordinarily. If a person begins to give themselves the first conscious shock, the shock of self-remembering, the shock of the whole work, if they begin to transform their daily contact with life and not take things as always, in the ordinary manner in which they always take them. If they feel deeply that they are mostly doing something else, and that they are related to something else, which gradually becomes more important, then they may make hydrogen 12 at the point Me in the octave, which is Me12. This Me12 will create as it were a child, that we have to look at very closely if we wish to remain in the work. What is the child created by Me12? It is something quite new in us. We must pay attention to this newly formed thing in us which is the beginning of our own rebirth. This new thing, this inner child, can easily die if its parent goes to sleep. When the child exists in any of us, it must be given the right food, and we must be very careful with it. Of course the child cannot be seen externally, and we must remember that the child emerging in us, the child that is our relationship to this work, the child that any of us can form, appears at the note Me. It is not at C where it would have to become something else instantly. Our inner child is at the note Me, and therefore at a place where there is a missing semitone, in a way similar to the child born out of C12. The shock that has to be given to the child born at C12 is obvious. However, what is the shock that is required to carry the child born at Me12, beyond the place of the missing semitone? How often people give rise to an infant, which they murder because they have not the strength nor the depth of character and necessary aim to raise that inner child up beyond their ordinary level. How many seed germs the work sows? How often people have for a moment a child in this work, speaking of those invisible children born of our own understanding, and how often the children, like their counterparts in life, suffer from scurvy, whooping cough, typhoid fever, chickenpox, tuberculosis and so on, as when one becomes negative in the work. The power of concepts in man, that is found in the spiritual realm, in our thinking and in our feeling, is very weak, particularly when someone is left without help for some time, without praise, or without special attention. In this work it is important to keep something invisible going always, in spite of all of the external difficulties. In the Gospels it is referred to as faith, those things that go unsaid. In this work it is called work on self, in connection with aim. Remember where it is said that we have to fight for this work. All the time there are negative eyes, based on sensual life, on our 5 physical senses that attack us, the work of Mara. If we have no capacity in ourselves of inner concepts, of inner thinking and inner feeling, then the work will fall by the wayside, upon stony ground. There, when the heat of the sun is too strong, this little thing born in us from the seed germ of the work will fade, our inner child born of me 12 will continually die. We will have periods of enthusiasm, and then when we become offended, possessing no real power of inner concepts, our children will simply expire. It is a strange thing to reflect upon, what it means to keep this work alive and young in ourselves. Which is not possible if we look to the evidence of our senses for proof. What did that unknown writer, thought to be a woman, say in Hebrews 12? Faith is the evidence of things not seen. When we understand something and see the truth of it in our own minds, do we wish that to be supported by the evidence of things seen? Do we wish to have people agree with us, or are we strong enough to do without the proof of external and visible things, satisfied with just knowing? If you are not strong enough to conceive a child in your own mind, then keep this child alive, that newborn thing inside of you, then you can only expect that it will die through sheer lack of sustenance. Every time we connect thoughts, see new meaning, apply the work to ourselves, notice what we are saying, see our own mechanicalness, separate from negative emotions, not allow ourselves to go with weak, silly eyes or dangerous eyes that sabotage our effort. Every time we give ourselves that first conscious shock, the shock of this work, we provide nourishment to the child that is our new self, reborn.